In the early hours of November 28th, 1953, Frank Olson falls to his death from a hotel window in New York City. Before he dies, he tries to whisper something, but the message can't be decoded. Olson had been working on top secret projects at the cutting edge of biological warfare, and his untimely demise left a web of unanswered questions that would rip the lid off the most controversial and inhumane projects in American history, known as MK Ultra. If you want to hear more about this project, who exactly had reason to kill Frank Olson, stick around. We're going to circle around back to 1910. Frank is born in Hurley, Wisconsin. This guy was exceptionally bright with a keen interest in the sciences from a super young age. Growing up in Wisconsin, Frank eventually becomes a highly skilled bacteriologist with a PhD under his belt from the University of Wisconsin. During his time, World War II starts, and this comes with an opportunity. Olson finds himself at Camp Dietrich in Maryland. Frank is summoned there because of his expertise. He's a skilled bacteriologist. He's working specifically the U.S. Army Biological Warfare Laboratory. Olson quickly becomes a pivotal player in some of the most covert operations of the time. Known for his scientific mind, Olson is recruited for the MK Ultra project. This project was a significant departure from his previous work, shifting from biological agents to psychological warfare. Project MK Ultra was a clandestine CIA operation that took place in the 1950s, continuing up to around 1970. The primary focus was researching and developing mind control and behavior modification techniques. I know what you're thinking, but trust me, this actually happened, and some of the stuff they found was very real. The project was a response to the perceived threat from China, North Korea, and the Soviet Union. They thought these guys were doing it, we better get on that, or they're going to be basically melting us with their friggin' minds. So the purpose again of MK Ultra is to see how much we can control the human mind. And the idea of ethics in this case is completely thrown out the window, and MK Ultra employs a wide range of disturbing and often horrifying methods in their experiments. One of the primary techniques used involves psychoactive drugs, in particular LSD. They would alter the minds of unsuspecting subjects. Participants were often dosed without their knowledge or consent, leading to severe and unpredictable psychological effects. In some extreme cases, this involved using prostitutes to lure men to a place where they could actually dose and film the effects of the drugs on these kind of unsuspecting Johns. Well, another method that they used was, in conjunction to that, was ECT or electroconvulsive therapy. And this was done, believe it or not, through universities. And this is often basically done by administering electrical shocks to the brain, which could cause memory loss, confusion, and severe physical pain. The goal was to erase existing thoughts and behaviors, basically hoping to implant new ones. And it's crazy because one of the people is actually Ted Kaczynski, who was the American Unabomber who went on to, I think he killed only about 3 people, but he bombed a bunch of stuff. Yeah, he was a victim of this stuff and his brain was fried. And it's funny because a lot of his manifestos that he wrote was about how technology is ruining our world, and then the CIA basically shocked this guy's brain. CIA, in partnership with doctors at these universities, would get you, let's say, maybe going to see the therapist because you're schizophrenic and you're referred to this clinic, and that's when you're going to be subjected to all these experiments against your will. So MK Ultra doesn't stop there. They also use sensory deprivations, basically with completely isolated subjects, often in complete darkness and silence for extended periods of time. Hypnosis was another tool that they often use. And basically, using this hopeness, they would try to induce states of heightened suggestibility in their subjects, allowing for the implantation of false memories or triggering of specific actions. This was part of the broader effort to create essentially a Manchurian candidate. This is individuals who essentially could be programmed to perform specific tasks such as assassinations. Another thing that they tested was basically, can these drugs like LSD be used against their own people to make them essentially divulge national secrets or national security information? Part of MK Ultra was dosing some of the people involved in the project, and that's something we're going to get to more. Let's jump into one of the most controversial and possibly the craziest link to MK Ultra that I've found. It is the potential connection between Charles Manson and the project itself. So picture the 1960s, a time of social upheaval and counterculture revolutions. Tons of hippies everywhere. It sure smelled a lot, I bet. The government is infiltrating a lot of different groups, trying to prevent communism from entering the country, and just essentially making sure that the general population loves the government. Enter Charles Manson, a name synonymous with infamy, but there's more to the story. So for those of you who don't know, Charles Manson is famous for starting a hippie cult and the crazy murder of an actress named Sharon Tate. So some researchers, including Tom O'Neill, suggest that Manson was actually one of MK Ultra's unwitting subjects. Manson spent time at the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic in San Francisco, which was a place linked to the MK Ultra research. So this is one of the spots where they would drug unsuspecting victim. And it was known that the CIA often infiltrated groups during his time to counteract threats of what they saw as national security. They targeted counterculture movements such as Black Power activists and anyone they thought could destabilize society. By infiltrating these groups, they aimed to manipulate and control the group itself and steer them in the ways that they wanted. This was part of a broader effort under operations like COINTELPRO and Project Chaos, designed to disrupt and discredit dissident groups. So imagine Manson, who was a troubled drifter, being exposed to powerful hallucinogens and psychological tactics aimed at breaking and remolding the human mind. This speculation posits that the techniques used in MK Ultra could have exacerbated instability and potentially turning him into a puppet for more sinister forces. The effect of MK Ultra's experiments were devastating to anybody it touched, and Manson's time at the Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic coincided with his increasing ability to manipulate and control his followers, famously known as the Manson family. Under his influence, they committed the gruesome Tate-LaBianca murders in 1969, shocking the world and marking one of the darkest chapters in American criminal history. So it's important to note, again, Manson started this Manson family cult, and did the CIA either infiltrate him or were they influencing him? It's hard to say, but it sure looks like they might have. The idea that Manson was a pawn in a larger game challenges everything we know about his crimes. Anyhow, food for thought. Let's get into a little bit behind some of the figures that ran the program itself. So there was quite a few doctors involved, but one of the more famous ones is Dr. Louis Jolyon West, also referred to as Jolly West. And he was a prominent psychiatrist and neuroscientist. And yeah, this guy had been involved with a lot of kind of secret government work, such as the Jack Ruby case, the guy that killed Lee Harvey Oswald. But specifically, he was involved in this Haight-Ashbury Free Medical Clinic. So if anyone was drugging Manson, it probably would have been him. So a couple other key doctors in this that were the key figures in this was Dr. Sidney Gottlieb and Dr. Ewan Cameron. These guys tortured and messed up God knows how many people. I don't think we know the amount of victims because a lot of this was done in such secrecy it'll be hidden forever. The methods used in MK Ultra were basically reminiscent of the horrific human experiments conducted by the Nazis during World War II. Only years before MK Ultra, the entire international community banded together, basically banned human experimentation like this. Everybody agreed, we're not going to do it. What's the CIA do? They do it on their own population. It blows my mind that this stuff was happening in the 50s up into the 70s. But here's the thing. MK Ultra wasn't just an American enterprise and reached all the way into Canada, where a similar program of mind control experiments was being conducted. This was not just a footnote in the MK Ultra. It was a deeply disturbing chapter that had a profound and lasting effects on countless individuals, particularly Canada's Indigenous community. This isn't a totally well-known thing, but I began to uncover more and more, and I know the CBC has done some reporting on this, but at McGill University in Montreal, a psychiatrist by the name of Dr. Ewan Cameron conducted what became known as the Montreal Experiments. These experiments mirrored MK Ultra's methods. The patients in this case, they definitely weren't willing. These were ordinary people seeking help for common mental health problems who instead found themselves trapped in a nightmare. And yes, all of this was funded by Project MK Ultra. The impact of these experiments was completely devastating, in particular to Canada's Indigenous communities. For those that don't know, Canada had a residential school system where a lot of Indigenous members were essentially scooped up, and they tried to assimilate them into white culture, or whatever our culture was at that time. And it just ended up leading to tons of abuse. The residential schools were targeted in this project. So the kids that were already scooped up and taken away from the parents, we're going to electrocute them and give them LSD.
All right, let's circle back around to Frank Olson, his involvement with MK Ultra, and exactly how it led to his death.
So in 1953, Frank attends a retreat as part of his project at Deep Creek Lake in Maryland. He goes there with a group of CIA scientists. His colleague, Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, spiked Olson's drink with LSD. As you can imagine, he's probably sent to the moon with this. I can't imagine what that would be like. Like, psychoactive drugs are powerful. They got a lot of medicinal uses. Being drugged, especially when you're already in kind of part of a clandestine agency carrying out spy activities, that world's rife with paranoia. So then you throw psychoactive drugs in there, you're not too far off from becoming like the tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theory nut. So this level-headed dude, after he's dosed, he becomes completely erratic, losing his grip on reality, and he doesn't know what's what. But one of the effects, if you don't know, of LSD or any psychoactive can be like the dissolution of your ego, or ego death, so to speak. And it's typically a good thing. It's a good thing for people like going through therapy, but if you're getting dosed unexpectedly and this happens, and it's essentially re-scrambling your brain in a sense and disconnecting all the neural pathways and breaking them down so they can grow into kind of better patterns.
So Olson's given a heroic dose of LSD. The circumstances of Olson's dosing were part of a broader MK Ultra project designed to test the effects of LSD on individuals without their knowledge. Olson, being a scientist deeply involved with highly classified biological warfare research, was seen as an ideal test subject by his superiors at the CIA. So during this retreat to Deep Creek Lake, he's basically drugged by his colleague, Dr. Sidney Gottlieb. The rationale was to observe whether or not the drug would impact his role as a person critical to national security. Would he divulge information? Would he become a risk to the government? Almost immediately, Olson began to experience severe psychological distress. His mind, once a sharp analytical tool, descended into chaos. He became increasingly paranoid, anxious, and struggled to differentiate between reality and hallucinations. The psychological toll was completely devastating for him. His behavior became very erratic, his thoughts were fragmented, and he didn't know who he was anymore. As his condition worsens, Olson's superiors grew concerned about the situations and about whether or not he was safe to handle secret information. To manage this situation, they decided to arrange a visit to a psychiatrist. And on November 24, 1953, Olson is taken to New York City under the pretense of receiving professional help. There, he's placed under the care of a CIA-affiliated psychiatrist, Dr. Harold Abramson, an attempt to stabilize his mental state. I would be worried anytime the government was going to send me to see one of their own psychiatrists. That's all I'm saying.
His life is falling apart, and the CIA is worried about his well-being, so they take him to New York to see a psychiatrist under the care of a CIA operative, so they brought him there. So his condition continues to deteriorate. Olson is put in room 1018A of the Hotel Statler. As his condition continues to basically get worse, they're keeping an eye on him. They don't trust him. But unfortunately, in the early hours of November 28th, Olson fell to his death from the window of the 10th floor of his hotel room. The circumstances of his death were not immediately suspicious, especially given his mental states. The official investigation concluded that Olson's death was a suicide, with the CIA asserting that he had experienced a mental health breakdown due to work-related stress. They claimed that Olson had thrown himself out a window, driven by suicide and mental instability. Yeah, that seemed, given what happened, that seemed logical conclusion to make. However, you're already doing the other things, the LSD thing, drugging the public, and we're not crossing anything off the list here as being possible. So the official narrative regarding Olson's death didn't go over well with his family. The family was initially told Frank had suffered a fatal fall or possibly jumped out a hotel window. It wasn't until 1979 the Rockefeller Commission unearths the MK Ultra project and the truth starts to come out. In the wake of these revelations, doubts about the official suicide narrative grew. The Olson's family had Frank's body exhumed in 1994. This is still going on. Look at that span of time. So the Olson family, they bring out this guy's body, they give him a dig and pull out his bones. And Dr. James Stars, he performs this examination on Olson's body. So the examination finds injuries on Olson's body that likely occurred before the fall, suggesting Olson had been knocked unconscious before being thrown out the window. This, coupled with the absence of glass shards on Olson's clothes, he concludes this is no suicide. All the suspicions the family had that the CIA was running this MK Ultra project, and this information comes out that they had been secretly dosing people. This disclosure was a seismic shift in the Olson family's case against the government. Like, they're fighting. Frank's son, Eric Olson, became a relentless advocate in the pursuit of truth. Eric, who was the only 9 when his father died, devoted his entire life to uncovering the real circumstances. As a psychologist, he brought an analytical eye to the information he collected, meticulously examining and piecing together timelines, confronting the CIA's narrative. I actually think at one point the family did get some kind of apology from the government. Okay, let's move on to 2012. They file a lawsuit. The legal fight basically ends and it's tossed out because they were able to say, hey, you've passed the statute of limitations and there's sovereign immunity in this case. Sorry guys, no money for you. Despite these obstacles, they didn't give up though. They continued the pursuit and keeping Frank's story alive and keeping it in the public's eye. The relentless efforts led to further government admissions over the years about the CIA's covert actions. There's never been I don't think they've officially come out and ever ruled Frank's death anything other than a suicide, but I don't think that really matters. They killed him one way or the other. It's a tragedy. Olson's whole story is a tragedy. This guy was loved by his family, good dude, had mental health issues. That night when they dosed his coffee, they ended his life. He ends up on a whole downward slope until he completely loses grip on reality. I'm not swayed either way because it doesn't make a difference to me. It's the same villainous thing. So I want to talk about a very recent update regarding this case in Canada. This comes from the CBC in Quebec, where there's been a class action suit filed over the infamous MK Ultra, particularly the brainwashing. It's interesting to see that there's still court cases going on to this day. And just it's related to this because I mentioned like the Montreal project and MK Ultra. I just want to note that there was other experiments going on during the Cold War era. Things like Project Bluebird was the CIA's first mind control program, which was initiated in 1950, and it was designed to develop better interrogation methods. Project Artichoke launched in 1951, and this was trying to see whether you could take a person and make them perform an assassination involuntarily. It used forced morphine addiction and also hypnosis. The Navy program called Project Chatter, this is testing truth drugs. So, what substances can be administered to people where they have to tell you everything they know, even their bank codes. It says don't share if they won't, but they fucking share it. A little bit of sodium, what is it, sodium pentothal? I don't know, something like that. Let me get on with this. Let's talk about Operation Paperclip. Although this is not really a mind control program, it was significant because I think that's why sometimes maybe you see this mirroring some of the Nazi programs because they brought over Nazi scientists. Nazi scientists going to be Nazis. When you're hammer, everything's a nail. Yeah, man. Probably could have did better screening on that. What do I know? Project MK Search is another one aimed at trying to manipulate human behavior in a predictable manner. MK often is a branch of that. And essentially, these are all just small little spin-offs of the original kind of programs. They're trying to control humans in the same way we might control like a robot. I wonder if they do. We wouldn't know. So that's the thing. You wouldn't know. They're controlling you. Then they could tell you to erase those memories and you would never know. So, yeah. Don't do it, guys. Don't take anything in this presentation. Don't take it and rely on it because I don't want to get fucking sued. There's some good conspiracy theories. However, it's one of these things where who am I to say? I have no idea. But they're entertaining nonetheless. So my favorite conspiracy is that the CIA was involved with the Doors and Jim Morrison, and that the lyrics in the Doors songs were actually part of a mind control experiment to manipulate the listeners' minds. Yeah, like I could see in his music how people could think there's hidden messages. The guy wrote an ode to his penis. He was an interesting guy, great musician. So as part of the conspiracy as well as that, I don't know if this is like directly MK Ultra, so I'm not going to say that it is, but there's two of them. Significant efforts have been made to uncover the truth in all these cases, but the only thing we know is, I think things confirmed from the Rockefeller Commission, is that there was LSD experiments going on. Frank Olson, whether he committed suicide or was murdered, he did have a psychotic break after he was dosed with LSD. So that's what we know, at least. In the spirit of open dialogue, though, I want to encourage conversation about this and just encourage listeners to use like good Bayesian reasoning. Don't think one thing is everything's not black and white. And I hope to the victims that are out there, because we do know that at the very least some of it did happen. And to those victims that are out there, or the people that did suffer at the hands of this, like I really hope for those of you that survived, you find a way to heal. So thank you again for joining, and we will be back again soon with another episode. And again,